One of the things that I love to talk about on this channel, besides my movie reviews and calling out ridiculous opinions, I love to talk about when an old school director, a legend in the game, speaks up and speaks out about the current climate in film culture. And it just so happens that the ever so outspoken and unapologetically blunt Ridley Scott had some things to say this week. This coming as he is currently doing press for his upcoming film Napoleon that is going to be released later this week. And one thing has been made perfectly clear based on some of his comments. Ridley Scott is still here, and he still doesn't give a f***. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
You know, usually when directors like Ridley Scott get interviewed by the mainstream media, they typically get asked questions about Marvel and superhero films. They get baited into responses that are later used as clickbait articles that are sure to enrage salty fanboys everywhere. But surprisingly, that really didn't happen this time with Ridley Scott. Although I did see some people trying to use some old comments he made about superhero films to try to get some clicks.
You're pathetically predictable.
Like this comment, which was presented as something new, but he actually said this a little while ago. I know because I already did a video on it back when he originally said it. Of course, the fanboys, being the sensitive bunch that they are, still got mad at the quote, because of course they did. Because you see, when it comes to the opinions of these legendary directors, whether people want to admit it or not, their words carry a little bit more weight, and it stings a little bit more when they express their opinions. Typically because those comments are hitting a little bit too close to home, and there's a lot of truth in what they are saying. And some people who have made these movies their entire identity have taken offense to that.
Let's gut the freaking nerd.
But as I've said with Martin Scorsese or Quentin Tarantino or anyone else from the film world who has had an opinion like this, maybe we'd all be better off if we actually listened to what they have to say, rather than trying to dismiss them because they didn't validate our own opinions. Trust me, movies would be a lot better, including some comic book movies, if studios took some of these criticisms, learned from them, and used it to make a better product.
That makes sense.
But that will probably never happen because the pride of your average Twitter fanboy just won't allow it. Which brings me back to Ridley Scott, who has been addressing some of the criticisms that people have had for his new film, Napoleon. And I wouldn't even say that he's not being open to criticism like fanboys are. I think he just genuinely doesn't care about criticism, and that's kind of refreshing to me. It's kind of the John Carpenter talking about Barbie situation all over again, where you have a guy whose status is already solidified, he's really got nothing left to prove, and he knows what he likes and doesn't like, and doesn't really care what anyone thinks of that.
I don't give a
We need more people like that, who are willing to be unapologetically real about certain things. And even if I don't agree with everything that he says, that doesn't make him out of touch or problematic. It simply means that he has his own unique perspective on things, and to me, that's how it should be. To me, nothing makes film discussion more boring than the groupthink mentality. Because we'll never learn anything, and there will never be real change if we're all just holding hands and singing Kumbaya and agreeing with each other.
S-O-F capital T, soft, huh?
Now, do you always have to be as blunt and stuck in your ways as Ridley Scott is? Maybe not. I think he could benefit from loosening up a little bit and not being so rigid. But on the flip side of that, that's who he is. That's really who he's always been. He's 85 years old. He's still making movies, and he's going to do things the way that he wants to do them. And in my opinion, unlike some people, he's earned the right to be that way. So a lot of the early criticisms for Ridley Scott's Napoleon film involve the historical inaccuracies. In fact, Ridley himself reacted to many of the people criticizing his film for those inaccuracies by saying, "Get a life." In response to a question about filming a scene depicting Napoleon's cannons firing at the pyramids of Egypt, Ridley responded, "I don't know if he did that, but it was a fast way of saying he took Egypt." Hard to argue with that, I guess. Ridley also responded to negative comments from French critics about Napoleon that, quote, "The French don't even like themselves."
I don't know, Lloyd. The French are assholes.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are the comments of someone who clearly does not give a f***. It is rare in this day and age to see someone be so brutally honest when most people have been programmed to be the exact opposite. A lot of times in these interviews we get those scripted studio responses, but not from Ridley Scott. And that's part of his appeal, in my opinion. It makes him feel like a real person and not just another cog in the Hollywood machine.
It's Hollywood, baby. Who knows what's gonna happen?
We're kidding ourselves if we're going to sit here and say that every historical film has been 100% historically accurate. We know that creative liberties are taken in these stories all the time. Whether it be to make things a bit more cinematically pleasing, which is kind of what Ridley Scott is talking about here, or it could be just because we simply don't know enough about the subject to make it 100% accurate, so the creatives typically just fill in the holes with what feels right to them.
That's what she said.
We could argue all day long about whether we think movies should be more historically accurate or not. To me, what it really comes down to is, are you capturing the essence of the person or event you are depicting? Because to me, that's all that really matters in these situations. And clearly this is the way that Ridley wanted to tell his story, so I guess we'll have to wait and see how it plays out in the final film. I'm not going to sit here and act like Ridley Scott has never made a subpar or bad film. I'm not even going to say that he's never made a bad historical film. But I will say that one of his best movies was a fake story based around a real historical time period. And to this day, I love every minute of that movie. So I think Ridley Scott being a little bit of a savage here is kind of expected, because in his mind, he's telling the story that he wanted to tell in the way that he wanted to tell it. And again, all that really matters to me is that in the film is Napoleon himself as a character depicted in the right way. Ridley Scott was also asked if he shares the same fears of time running out on his career that Martin Scorsese recently expressed. Ridley responded, "Since he started Killers of the Flower Moon, I've made 4 films. I don't think about it. I get up in the morning and say, ah, great, another day of stress." I think we can all agree that Ridley Scott has taken a quantity over quality approach to filmmaking, especially more recently, which, as I say all the time, to me isn't the best approach. To me, based on this quote, he views filmmaking a bit differently than someone like Martin Scorsese does. It sounds like it's more of a job for Ridley Scott. And that's not to say he doesn't enjoy it or that he's not passionate about what he's doing, but I just don't think he thinks about putting in as much time and effort into one project as some other directors do. Now you can take that however you want, but in a weird sort of way, it makes it all the more impressive that he put out the classics that he did using this approach to filmmaking.
He's good. With my help, he could be the best.
And again, maybe he wasn't always like this, but it's hard to argue with him when he has films like Alien, Blade Runner, and Gladiator under his belt. And even some of his less highly regarded films are still better than some other directors' work on their best day. Bottom line here is that clearly Ridley Scott is a man who marches to the beat of his own drum, and to me he should not be criticized for that. He should be celebrated. To me, artists like Ridley Scott are not easy to come by, and a little bit more of a unique approach to life and filmmaking might be exactly what Hollywood needs in this creatively bankrupt time that we find ourselves in. To me, we need less people falling in line and more people challenging the status quo. The truth is, all of this talk around Napoleon hasn't ruined my excitement for the film at all. In fact, it's made me even more excited to see it. And whether I end up enjoying it or not is irrelevant at this point, because I'm just going to be thankful for everything that Ridley Scott has given us and everything that he will be giving us in the future.
Y'all be cool. Right on.